So the Giants coming off a very impressive 27-17 win over the Philadelphia Eagles to split the season series. But more important, finally snapped that 8-game losing streak coming in. The Eagles had also won 12 of 13, 21 of 25. So whoever was holding the voodoo doll, thank you very much for putting that down. It's about time. I think that's long overdue as the Giants got their first win over the Eagles since 2016. Back-to-back divisional wins and 3-2 now in the division entering the bye. So a lot of momentum here over the last few weeks. And, Paul, this game, to me, is a game in which I think all three facets put their stamp on this victory. You could point to the special teams with Riley Dixon's punting, Graham Gano coming through with field goals. The field positioning was not a gift at all throughout the game to the Eagles. The strong rushing attack, Daniel Jones's decision-making, and then, of course, the defense, like we saw against Washington, forcing a pair of turnover on downs on each of the last two possessions to seal the win.
Well, Lance, I'm going to go for a fourth item, and that is anybody who listens to this show on a regular basis. They know that Jeff Eagles and I were talking last week on BBKL about planting some garlic in the middle of the field that would exorcise the Eagles' demons and the hex. Well, indeed, it has been effective and worked, so I suppose we're going to have to go back to the Italian market and get some more garlic for the rest of the season. But having said that, you are absolutely correct. The Giants played a very high-level and efficient game in every area. I can honestly tell you, even though they've had some good games this year, certainly against Tampa Bay, that was a well-played game against a high-quality opponent. They played well for the most part against Pittsburgh opening night. Obviously, the Rams and the Bears consider themselves playoff contenders, and the Giants played very, very tight games against them. I don't think there's been any game this year where the Giants were as high a level and as high efficiency as they were yesterday against the Eagles.
And as a result of that high efficiency, notice they did not turn the ball over for the second straight game. And, Paul, we've talked about this on this show plenty of times. Turnover differential synonymous with wins and losses. I don't think it's any coincidence that now the Giants have won 2 straight games in which they have held onto the ball and they've protected the football. And that was partially because of Daniel Jones's decision-making in terms of when to walk that fine line of being aggressive when, for example, he threw the 40-yard completion to Darius Slayton that set up the field goal to make it a 2-possession game. And then also taking what the defense gave him. He had the big rushing touchdown himself, but the presence of the running game, to me, showed up immensely in terms of, Paul, down and distance. And 5 of 14 on third down doesn't jump off the page. But here's where you got to peel the layers back a little bit more. 10 of those 14 downs were for 5 yards or less. And the reason being, Paul, was because of the efficiency on first and second down as a result of that rushing attack.
Well, how many times have we said throughout the course of the season, because this has actually been true from the beginning, and that is the Giants have been a very average team. Not bad, but right in the middle of the pack. They've been very average when it comes down to 3rd and 5 or less. Their problems beginning back in September were in the long yardage situations. And you have talked about this virtually every week. This is one of the stats that you love as one of your pet peeves. And it's really come into focus now because the Giants have tried to shorten those third down situations and put themselves in more manageable spots. We have seen from the very get-go they can handle the third and medium range downs. That's just not something that they are incapable of doing. And a lot of people were not recognizing this. You've been on it from the beginning. And what we've now seen, and I want to go back to your other point about the turnover situation, is not only are you converting more of your third downs, which allows you to keep the ball, but then by not turning the ball over, you're able to do more with those drives. And Daniel Jones has now gone, I believe it's almost 9 quarters without throwing an interception. And in each of the last 2 weeks, I've counted 2 sacks in each of those games where I saw a significant difference in him, where he held the ball, ate it, and took the sack, where a month and a half ago he would have tried to throw it and make a play, and it probably would have turned out bad. And I think that is incredibly significant.
I'm with you. It's all about at-bats. I like to use the baseball analogy when you have those lengthy drives, to your point, and you protect the football. Number one, you don't give gifts to the opposition. And that showed up in terms of the Eagles not having any gifts whatsoever in terms of moving the football into the red zone. I mean, they had to go 75, 80 yards throughout this entire game if they wanted to score, and we'll get to that in a second. But then the other aspect is when you are efficient in terms of third down as well as holding on to the football, you get then within striking distance, which the Giants did, but they also finished within the red zone, Paul. And that's not just something that we saw, by the way, in yesterday's game. They're 9 of 11 over the last 4 games in the red zone. Prior to that, Paul, they were 4 of 16 in the red zone. So you wonder, okay, well, what has dramatically changed? Why are they punching it in? Well, here we go. The rushing attack. Think about this. When you're inside the opponent's 20, you have not nearly as much space to work with. So, you can't air it out. You can't take those deep shots. You have to be efficient in those small spaces. The best way to do that, of course, is pound the ball, no matter what angle you're running at. And by them having the ability to run in those short spaces, and the offensive line deserves a lot of credit as well, that's why they're finishing. And that's why they're not settling for 3 points. They're putting touchdowns on the board. And that was why they came right out of the gates. First 2 possessions of the game, Giants scored touchdowns. Why? Because they were very good at running the football.
You know what, Lance? It boggles my mind. I started doing the BBK show as one of the rotating hosts. I guess it was about 11 years ago. You and I first started doing a similar type of show for post games. And then it developed into what is now the full-fledged BBK show. And from the very beginning when I first got here, I kept talking about power football, winning the trenches, having a strong offensive line, smashing it. Make sure that you have an effective and functional running game. It doesn't have to have explosiveness and exciting kind of numbers all the way around the board. It just has to be a running game that you can count on when you need it. It has to be situational, efficient, and functional. And all of these things I heard for the first 5 or 6 years that I was doing this show. Oh, you're old school. It doesn't work anymore. Running the ball doesn't matter. Offensive line isn't important. You need the quarterback. You need the receivers. Got to make big plays. Got to throw it. I heard all that garbage and all that junk, okay? And that's all it was. And I held firm to all of it. And now the Giants have finally come around to implementing the kind of things that we all know Football 101 says works. And all of these things, it's like my entire checklist, my entire menu is now starting to get filled out again for the first time in a long time. And this is what winning NFL football is supposed to look like. And the Giants are now starting to check most of those boxes. They're not quite there yet. They still got work to do. Let's not kid ourselves, Lance. The team is what I said they were going to be all along. A middle-of-the-road, 500 caliber team. And the first month of this season was to be a pseudo preseason. We'll take away the 0-4 start. What are the Giants? They are 3-3. They are a middle-of-the-pack, 500 team. They are not the dreg that most people wanted to project them as, because they are not the same team that took the football field in September. They're just not.
Well, and the whole goal is you want to see progression out of a team. And I think we're at that point where we're starting to see the Giants correct some of those self-inflicted wounds that were coming back to bite them and plaguing them at the worst possible time. But to your point, listen, you look at the division right now, you got the Eagles at 3-5-1. You got the Giants at 3-7, and then Washington and Dallas at 2-7. So everybody's still very much bunched together. The small things, the nuances of the game is going to determine who wins this division, because right now, nobody has been able to separate themselves from the pack because everybody's had their ups and downs, very similar to the Giants. But I want to build off of that parallel based on your point about playing the trenches and the fundamentals. Well, if you didn't watch any of this game yesterday and you looked at the final score and you were wondering, well, how is it that the Giants won 27-17 if the Eagles, for the first time this season, by the way, Paul, the Eagles didn't turn the ball over either, okay? So Philadelphia's going back and they're saying to themselves, wait a minute, we've been plagued by turnovers. We're -7. We actually protected the football, yet we still lost by 10 points. So you wonder, okay, well, wait a minute. How did Philadelphia then not finish this game? Well, it's simple. The Giants, I mentioned the third downs and distances. The Eagles were 0 for 9 on third down. But forget the 0 for 9. How about the fact that, Paul, 6 of those 9 downs were for 10 yards or more? So what was the biggest difference between the Giants and the Eagles? Well, the Giants had much more favorable third downs and distances.
Yes.
And that gave them more flexibility in the play calling compared to what Philadelphia was looking at when Philadelphia was facing especially all in the second half, 3rd and 11, 3rd and 14, 3rd and 11, 3rd and 18, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 10. I mean, your chances of execution are going down, regardless of the talent. And also, the Eagles were plagued by penalties. Now, the Giants had 7, but Philadelphia was a consistent flow throughout the game. So we bring it back to fundamentals. That's how this game was won for one team and lost for the other team.
Well, before you get off of the stat for the penalties, remember the Giants took 2 delay of games on purpose.
Correct. They were intentional.
So really 5 penalties.
That's fair.
And
granted, the Eagles, just real quickly, they also took a delay of game penalty intentionally.
Correct. And quite frankly, I also think the one pass interference call on Yadam, I believe it was, down the sideline when the ball was
Holmes,
overthrown.
wasn't that Holmes?
It was Holmes? It was Holmes. Yeah, on the one throw down the left sideline. The ball was uncatchable and way out of bounds. To me, a very questionable call. That's a flag that certainly should have been picked up. But having said all of that, what did we see? In addition to the 0 for 9 that the Giants defense held Philadelphia for on 3rd down, they also held them to 1 for 3 on 4th down, which is also something important when you play the Eagles because you know Doug Peterson is going to take those chances. And so you need to be able to win that down also. I think the other thing that is very significant here, when you talk about the style of play, we talk about the NFC East being so bunched up and so cluttered. And what has really been the difference over the last 5 or 6 years in this division? It has been Dallas with that strong offensive line, Philadelphia with that strong defensive line. It goes back to Football 101, how the teams in this division are always going to sort themselves out by who bullies the other team in the trenches. Well, the Giants aren't getting bullied anymore, okay? They've eaten their Popeye spinach, and now they are the bullies. And that is the difference. This team, the Fighting Joe Judges, has developed over the last 2 months into the team that is now going to sock you in the mouth when it comes to the line of scrimmage. And they've now exhibited that well over the last month of what we have seen. And I see no reason for it not to continue as they use these linemen, these offensive linemen, and even the defensive line. I mean, hey, 13 quarterback hits. If you saw my Twitter page, Lance, the Giants haven't had that many quarterback hits in a game since 2014 against Washington. That's a bunch of years now. Leonard Williams had 5 yesterday. That's the kind of defense that you want to play with your guys up front.
Well, speaking of just getting after the quarterback, what's also jumped out to me, they've had at least 2 sacks in every game this season. So, even the presence up front has been fairly consistent. Has it always been an X factor and a difference maker? No, but it has been consistent. And by wearing down Carson Wentz, by forcing him to get rid of the football, that led to a number of incompletions. I mean, look at Daniel Jones's numbers compared to Wentz. Daniel Jones was 21 of 28, so he had 7 incompletions. Carson Wentz had 16. Carson Wentz had double the amount of incompletions that Daniel Jones had. And a lot of that was, I would argue, the Giants getting hits on him or at least providing the pressure to make sure he would get rid of the football quickly.
Let me just work off of Jones's numbers for 1 second, though. You mentioned 21 of 28 for 244, okay? Let me add that there were 3 drops, 1 by Gallman and 2 by Slayton, so he easily could have been 24 out of 28. And on the other side of the ledger, and we've now seen this start to happen in the last 3 weeks, what have the Giants receivers done? Something I've been asking for a long time, Lance, and I've really emphasized it this year. Make the contested catch.
Yeah.
They helped him out again yesterday. We had 1 by Slayton. We had 1 by Shepard. We had 1 by Tate.
What about Deion Lewis made a great play, too?
Deion Lewis had a good one, too. Here I am. He's a running back. I was leaving him off the list.
No, but I think we should include everybody. I look at it, playmakers making plays.
It's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah. Still a contested catch. And week after week, you watch the highlights, the NFL highlights at night or the next morning, and every game there's a team making 2 or 3 contested catches for their quarterback, and it makes all the difference in the world. Okay, in terms of his numbers, your yardage production, and even your scoring opportunities. The Giants have done a horrible job at contested catches over the last several years. That's how they ruined a lot of Eli's numbers, and they weren't really helping Daniel Jones out a whole lot either. Well, lately, they're making contested catches. And those contested catches usually lead to really good drives that turn into points. And it's not a coincidence that they're making contested catches these last few weeks. And, oh, wow, guess what? Now the Giants are averaging 24 points a game over the last month and a half, when in the first month of the season, they were only averaging 11 points a game. Help out your quarterback, because once that ball leaves his hand, there's nothing else he can do to make the play. Your guy on the other side has to finish off the play. Finish the play. They've been doing it, and I can't say enough about how important that is. Help your quarterback out. He can't do it by himself, and it's great to see.